do you find the balance then between, for example, not just completely switching off? Some people may have work commitments that are still ongoing and that they will need to do whilst they're even in lockdown and whilst they're working from home. So how do we find the balance then between, for example, avoiding all of that stuff and going, it's not good for my mental health at the moment to be engaging in those sorts of activities, but we don't want to go too far the other way and completely switch off so that we're not able to turn it back on when we need to?
Yes, well, it's partly an individual thing, and it's largely about a balance, and there's no exact right and wrong. It's one of those kind of situations, but it's looking to be honest with ourselves about this. And actually, the way you pose that, it reminds me of a conversation I had with a client just yesterday. And this very issue came up, like when is it going too far to cut yourself some slack, so to speak? And this person, who has many different responsibilities and extra challenges at the moment, described to me, and the other day I was in bed till 2:00 in the afternoon. And she said it like a badge of shame, like what a terrible thing to have done. But one of the things that struck me is, well, it sounds like there were a lot of days that she wasn't in bed until 2:00 in the afternoon. Actually, it sounded like quite an exception the way she described it. And it sounded like she'd been very productive, other things that she'd done. And so I asked her a little bit more, and it was clear that this was quite an exception, but she still felt that was a bit of a waste of a day. But the way that I put it to her is, look, many people are having COVID injections at the moment. And like that could be a very good thing, but a number of people are finding side effects that the next day they're not going to work or they're struggling a little bit more or feeling a little bit fluey. I said to her, it sounds to me like you had half a sick day. And she said, when you put it like that, someone who clearly hadn't basically had any other sick days, when you put it in that context, how big a deal is that, having half a sick day? But one of the things we talked about briefly as well is she didn't feel very satisfied about that. That didn't work quite so well, maybe, the 2:00 thing. That might be a reminder later on. Well, if you're going to have a sleep in or whatever, maybe you get enough of a benefit from, say, being in bed until 10:00, even if it's an exception. So in other words, we're not just looking to say, it's fine to sleep in till 2:00 every day. That would be out of balance. And clearly this person felt some dissatisfaction about how that had worked out. But I think in the scheme of things, look at the big picture. Look at all the things that we are doing or each of us are managing with. Allow for the extra challenges that we have. And if we feel that we've dropped our bundle, if we just dropped it for a few hours or in a somewhat exceptional way or not been so productive for a day or two, well, let's put that in perspective. Overall, it's managing pretty well. And that person then recognised that actually what we were talking about, it did touch on a theme of perfectionism. And often people, when they have that conscientiousness, when they have lots of caring roles and work roles and just managing with everyday life and managing a home and things like that, well, when you look at all the different things that we have to do, it's fair enough to cut yourself some slack at times and accept sometimes you might react in a way you don't like, reflecting that you're struggling. So fair enough, sometimes that'll come across in different ways.